listeners, I'm Brittany.
And I'm Hallie.
And welcome back to The Abyss. Thanks for joining us again. Don't forget to subscribe on wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to rate us and give us a review if you would. That really helps us in ratings and getting into more people's feeds. We want to grow our little family. You can follow us on Instagram. You can like our Facebook page. We also have a separate Facebook group, The Abyss group, where we'll have a little bit more in-depth discussions on some of the cases. We'll talk more about our book club and things like that. Any updates and any of your thoughts, we'd love to hear them on there. And also, don't forget to go to our website. We have a lot of pictures and some more information, all of our sources and everything like that on our website. So don't forget to check that out as you're listening, and you can get kind of a better picture on what we're talking about.
I know for myself, a visual of a case really seals the case for me and helps me remember it better. It helps me remember any missing persons case, which is one we're going to be talking about today. So definitely go to the website.
We also have a contact form on there if you have any suggestions for a case or any thoughts. If you found any more information on any of the cases that we've talked about, feel free to share that. Anything like that will be on there. So go check that out.
At times, the world can seem so pleasant and trustworthy, especially in the mind of a child. Youthful and free 6-year-old Morgan Nick decided to go out of her comfort zone and catch some fireflies with her friends at a Little League game. All seemed well until her mother noticed Morgan is nowhere to be found. Her mother began to panic and starts doing whatever she can to find her daughter. This is the case of Morgan Nick.
So let's jump into the abyss. Morgan Chantel Nick was born September 12, 1988. Her parents are Colleen and John Nick, and they all lived in Ozark, Arkansas. Morgan had 2 younger siblings, a brother that was born in 1991 and a sister born in 1993. Colleen and John ultimately got divorced, and Morgan and her siblings lived with their mom. Morgan was described as bubbly and smart. She was really funny. She had a little mischievous streak that caused her to play little pranks on her family. She loved cats. When she was 5, she adopted a little kitten and she named her Emily. She was just a normal girl. She liked bubblegum and she was afraid of the dark. And one cute little story that her mom shared that kind of stood out to me was that Morgan signed up for track, but she decided it wasn't for her when she realized she'd have to be outside and get all sweaty. And she ended up joining Girl Scouts so she could, quote unquote, stay inside and glue things.
Same.
Yeah, that was so me as a kid. She had big dreams. She wanted to be a doctor/circus performer. So big aspirations there. On June 9th, 1991, Colleen took Morgan and her siblings to a baseball game at Woodford Ballpark near Alma, Arkansas. Colleen had felt lately like she hadn't been able to spend much time with Morgan, and life kind of just gets in the way, especially when you have 2 younger kids and stuff just happens. So she really wanted to get back to that and spend some quality time with her kids. There were a lot of people at this ball game. It was a small community, so they really celebrated things like sports and just coming together with friends and family, having fun. There were about 300 people in attendance there, and the game started at about 9 p.m. Everything seemed great at first. They were having fun. Morgan was sitting with her mom, giggling as she untied her mom's shoes as a little prank here and there. Eventually, when the game was running late, Morgan got a little restless. There were 2 other children, Jessica and Ty, that were catching fireflies in the parking lot nearby, and they asked Morgan if she wanted to come with them. And at first, her shyness kind of took over, and she didn't really want to leave her mom and go play with them. But as the game kind of dragged on, she finally decided that she wanted to go, and she started begging her mom to let her go. And Colleen was hesitant at first. She had been accused of being kind of a helicopter parent and sort of being a little overbearing or overprotective of Morgan. And as Morgan was growing up, she was really pressured to give Morgan more freedom and leeway there. So after being assured that the area was safe for the children to play in, Colleen finally relented and sent Morgan off. Colleen said in an interview, quote, "She threw her arms around my neck and gave me a big hug. She kissed my cheek and then climbed out of the bleachers and ran to where the cars were parked, which was less than 50 yards from where we were. We could see them running back and forth, playing, end quote. So the kids were still pretty close by, and they were being watched over as they were playing, and they were just catching fireflies and having fun. When the game finally ended about 15 minutes later, Colleen gathered up her 2 younger kids and all of their belongings and went to collect Morgan so they could all go home and get ready for bed, get ready for the day ahead of them tomorrow. She found Jessica and Ty, and when she didn't see Morgan, she immediately felt her stomach drop a little bit, as I think a lot of parents do when they have that moment of just not knowing where your kid is. She asked the children where Morgan was, and they said that the last time they had seen her was a few minutes before, when she was emptying the sand from her shoes by her mom's car. Fear gripped Colleen as she rushed to the car, looking all around it, inside it, even under it, but there was no sign of Morgan. Someone immediately called 911, and within 6 minutes, the police had arrived. They searched the area, they talked to the people around the game, including Jessica and Ty, and the children told police that they had seen a creepy man approach Morgan a short time before her disappearance, and so because of that, the police immediately regarded this case as a stranger abduction, and this began a nightmare that would never end for the Morgan Nix family.
Unfortunately, being abducted by a stranger is not uncommon. However, it is less likely than its counterparts. Family kidnappings are the answer to about 49% of abductions. This can be due to custody battles or revenge, which is much higher than acquaintance and stranger kidnappings. Acquaintance kidnappings occur about 27% of the times. These can be due to revenge also, but they can also be a result of grooming. Lastly, there's stranger kidnappings, which occur about 24% of the time. This would be the times that people are just snatched off the streets or lured into unsafe areas to be kidnapped. Usually there's no quote-unquote personal motive to the attack, and the kidnapper may not even know the individual's name. The Bureau's National Crime Information Center had 32,000 cases of missing people who are under the age of 18 in the year 2017. Even though this includes individuals who may have left on their own will, it is still an uncomfortably large number. It also stated that 1 out of every 10,000 missing children are not found alive, which is devastating. And 20% of children abductions not committed by a family member also result in the child not being found alive. Furthermore, 74% of children who are abducted and murdered lose their lives within the first 3 hours. This statistic is the most chilling of all, and it really stresses the significance of immediate action when a child goes missing, because that's 74% of the ones murdered will die in the first 3 hours.
Yeah, and that's so frustrating when you hear cases where the police are dragging their feet or family doesn't report them missing for hours, and you're like, that's such important time.
Yeah, the first few hours are definitely the most important in an individual's recovery. Sadly, only 2% of children who are in long-term abductions are able to make it home alive. And 74% of the victims of non-family child abductions are girls. Thankfully, the police in this case were arriving within 6 minutes, which gave them a great leadway. And they were able to get statements about the incident from many people at the game. They interviewed many witnesses and were able to develop a description and profile of the perpetrator as they knew. 1 adult and 2 children were able to provide descriptions of a Caucasian man in his mid-20s to late 30s who was about 6 feet tall and had an inch-long beard. He was said to have a quote-unquote hillbilly accent, and the man was said to be wearing jean shorts, no shirt, or shoes. However, police cautioned people not to focus too in-depth on the clothing aspect because there were some conflicting descriptions, which seems to be a constant in this case, as we'll get into more of that later. There are a lot of inconsistencies. An article that was published in June 2000 said that a man in a dull 1960s or 70s styled red pickup truck was talking to the children while they were playing at the game. The truck was said to have a white camper van shell that was too short for the truck, as well as a low wheelbase, rear damage on the passenger side, and curtains inside the shell covering the windows. Police had adult witnesses hypnotized to try and bring forth more information about the man's appearance, and they were able to form a sketch of the man. Chief Russell White of the Alma Police Department said, quote, "Basically everything we knew in the first 24 hours is what we know now. I do have the hope that she's still alive, but I have to be somewhat clinical. The odds are no, she's not alive," end quote. Colleen, Morgan's mother, was determined to do anything she could to find her daughter. She even went to the extent of moving into the volunteer fire station near the police for 6 weeks. Colleen said, quote, "I was absolutely not going home without my daughter," end quote.
After Morgan's abduction, the surrounding area was greatly impacted. Children were watched a lot more closely. You didn't see kids playing outside as much, definitely not without supervision. People were just scared, and rightly so. They had no idea what had happened to Morgan or if there was a predator waiting just to strike again at any point. So everyone wanted to be safe, and it sort of drove home that dangers were lurking around them, and you couldn't necessarily tell who was a friend and who was sketchy. Other events in the community had spooked them as well, even if there was no real connection to Morgan's case. On June 9th, the same day that Morgan went missing, a 4-year-old girl was pulled into a red truck at a laundromat. This turned out to be a custody dispute, but it still stung the community, and people still sort of related it back to Morgan's case and her disappearance. The next day, on June 10th, a 9-year-old was grabbed and pulled towards a men's restroom at a gas station in nearby Fort Smith. The young girl got away, and this case was not ultimately substantiated or investigated as part of Morgan's disappearance or anything like that. They just sort of let it be. Many agencies came together to work on Morgan's case. The Alma Police Department, Arkansas State Police, and the FBI all put in thousands of hours into this case. The coming months brought thousands of tips, but all of them ultimately led nowhere. An entire office was dedicated to all the paperwork associated with this case, and police even had to get an extra storage unit to house it all. It was considered one of the most active cases in the state's history. So they were really working hard to track down every lead, every suspect, every witness description, everything, and nothing was coming of it. In true Abyss fashion, we went pretty deep into researching this case, and sometimes the deeper you go, the shakier the information gets, but we tried to weed out things until we came to pieces of information that felt relevant. So these next few points come from a reporter that has researched the case, and we have the news articles, but not any official documentation from police or court records to support every single detail. They seem like something we should include though, so take these with a grain of salt, and definitely visit our website for more information and links and sources if you want to explore any of these avenues further or to see any of the wild stuff that we decided not to include. So the first bit of this information is an article from August of 1995. It details an incident in South Carolina in which a suspect in Morgan's case was seen. It was noted that he had changed his appearance, shaving and dyeing his hair, but he was still recognizable. There were 2 separate sightings allegedly reported to police, and the first was at a Belk. The second was at a store called World of Clothing. The clerk at World of Clothing described her interaction with the man and the little girl he was traveling with. According to this woman, the man told her that he was the uncle of this little girl and that they were very close, that he always took her out shopping. The little girl looked really subdued and solemn, and the only time she actually spoke was to tell the man that she didn't want to try on any more clothes, that she was done. So the man bought everything that was in her arms, and the pair left in a burgundy Hyundai. The clerk didn't think anything of this at first until she saw the poster of Morgan Nick with the sketch of the suspect. She immediately called police to report the sighting and work with police to come up with a sketch to reflect the changed appearance of the man. As far as we could find, this composite was either not created or just not released. Maybe it was an attempt for police not to spook him, let him know that they knew he had changed his appearance, or maybe it was just so they could more easily substantiate future sightings. We don't know whether this actually happened or not, if it was actually connected to Morgan's case or not, but we thought it was an interesting sort of element to this case. The second bit of information was an anonymous letter sent to the reporter on this case. The letter detailed an encounter in a store parking lot. Allegedly, 2 little girls were in this parking lot and were approached by a man and a woman. One of the little girls got scared, ran to her parents, and her dad came out to see what was going on. When he walked out, the woman got in the car and locked the door, refusing to speak. The father spoke to the man and got a really bad feeling about him. The couple's pickup truck was full of stuff and they were pulling a U-Haul, and the father just got a really bad vibe from them, so he ushered his kids away and reported this to the police. But according to the letter, police never followed up on it and never really connected it to Morgan's case. But what makes it even creepier is that it happened on the same day that Morgan was taken and in the same town. We're not sure why this letter is presented as anonymous, or whether that's how it was sent, or it was just a reporter protecting their sources. If this did in fact occur, could it be connected with Morgan Nick? We may never know, but it's an intriguing point. The last thing along these lines that we wanted to mention is that allegedly, shortly after Morgan was abducted, Colleen and the Fort Smith dispatch both received calls from an anonymous woman that told them she knew who kidnapped Morgan. There's more to this that you can look into if you want, but the gist is that this call led to the identity of a suspect that has not been disclosed so far. So back to our official timeline. By October of 1995, Colleen was campaigning for changes to the handling of missing child cases. She pushed for nationwide bulletins to go out within hours rather than days when a child is reported missing. We know how crucial those first few hours are. We talked about that earlier, how important it is to take immediate action on these cases. So what Colleen was fighting for was so important. She wasn't just fighting for Morgan, but for every child that was at risk and their families. Colleen wrote letters to the president and did everything she could to help Morgan and these other children.
A couple years after Morgan's disappearance, Colleen moved to Alma to be closer to the search efforts. In Colleen's new home, she set up Morgan's room the way it was left in their previous home. Basically, she packed up Morgan's belongings so her other kids could have their own rooms, but she kept elements of Morgan present. In June 2000, an article stated that 7 new federal and state officials had been assigned to Morgan's case. It also mentioned that they were releasing a new sketch of their suspected kidnapper, which was released in 2001. We have a photo of this most recent composite sketch of the suspect on our website for you to go check it out. On January 15th, 2002, a tip came in that Morgan was buried on private land in Boonville, Arkansas. The tip included an undisclosed name and was very specific, which caused the police to take this tip seriously. Even though the owner had nothing to do with the disappearance, and the police knew this, they went out to the property and used a backhoe to dig up all over the land. They brought dogs to assist in the search, but ultimately they came up empty-handed and ended the search around 9:30 p.m. 15 years after Morgan's disappearance, local law enforcement told the people working on Morgan's case that there was a known child predator who owned an abandoned trailer about 25 miles from Alma in Spiro, Oklahoma. This led to a search of the home in hopes of discovering any trace evidence or DNA that may connect to Morgan Nick. Unfortunately, they again came up empty-handed. According to the CNN News article published in 2010, there were thousands of documents that law enforcement had and hundreds of potential persons of interest. The profile of the perpetrator mentioned that he was probably a loner by nature and had very few friends and told nobody about the crime that was committed. Allegedly, the police had focused on a man who was at the game and may have made contact with Morgan, but this man is unidentified, and it also remains to be questionable information as to if this truly occurred. Furthermore, an inmate in Indiana confessed to kidnapping Morgan, but this claim was dismissed when he was unable to provide any real source of information about the disappearance. In August 2002, the police received a hit that Morgan's records and birth certificate had been accessed and were being used. Even though there was hope that they would get a step closer to Morgan, they were really let down when they discovered it was someone trying to buy her information off the internet. Tanya Smith and James Monhart were already felons and were arrested with computer fraud after attempting to steal the identity of Morgan Nick. Morgan's 2 friends, Jessica and Ty, who were present at her disappearance, both comment on the case. Ty comments on his recollection of the day's incident, which we will play the audio clip for you now.
Everybody, if you were a kid and you were at the baseball field, you always went up to the top of the hill because you couldn't see everything. There was like a sand pile and just where we're going to do construction or something. So everybody played in that weird sand mess that they had up there. And then we had been playing in the sand, and it was like a really weird smelling sand. So we had it in all of our shoes and everything. So we went to the car to dump out all the sand, and Jessica and I sat on the front of the car and Morgan was on the back of the car, and like just being kids, we didn't think anything about it, and when we got back up there, she was gone, and so was the guy's truck that was up there when we left. I didn't see him pick her up and take her, but there's just no other way. It happened so fast. Like someone had to have been up there, and he was up there when we left and he was gone when we got back, and so was she.
With such a traumatic event occurring at a young age, the details of Morgan's disappearance really stick in Ty's head as he talks about the smell of the sand and the way they played. We also have an audio clip from Jessica, and she talks about the weight of Morgan's disappearance that rests on her shoulders, and we're going to play that for you now.
I remember him being up there and a man leaning against his truck while we were playing. But you're so innocent then, you don't think anything, and you're just running around laughing and playing, and like I said, we were catching fireflies and just being kids. The man was up there, but you don't expect somebody to do anything. Like, we're around adults all the time. Like, I wasn't scared of anybody, or, I mean, it was a little strange, but you're innocent at that point. You don't think that something like that's ever going to happen. So we just kept running down the hill, and then when we got down to him, that's when we realized that she was gone.
But it's just a terrible situation, and if I just would have stopped, or like we would have stayed together better, then it wouldn't have ever happened.
Jessica clearly holds this burden that she should have done more and been more cautious and stayed closer together, but she was only a kid, and those thoughts don't benefit her. They don't change the past, and no one should have to live with that kind of pressure on their shoulders. And I don't think Morgan Nick would want her to live with that weight either.
On December 18th, 2017, the police came back to the property in Spiro, Oklahoma to search it again. Police had received a tip to search the well on the property, so they brought cadaver dogs and they brought the digging equipment back. The cadaver dogs did alert on the well, and that was deemed the center of investigation, but nothing of interest was found. The search was called off by 2:30 p.m. the following day, with investigators no closer to finding out what happened to Morgan Nick. Chief White mentioned that there was once a person of interest located in Spiro, but he didn't elaborate on the details with that. In 2019, Arkansas became the first state to gain national statewide certification for their child abduction response team. Whoop whoop! The Arkansas Amber Alert has been renamed to the Morgan Nick Amber Alert in honor of her case. Morgan's case was featured on the shows Unsolved Mysteries in 2001, Nancy Grace talked about it in 2010, and the case was also featured on America's Most Wanted in 2011. The Nick family also appeared on the show Extreme Makeover Home Edition after their home was damaged. This case received a lot of notoriety, not all of it good. Author and history professor at the University of Arkansas, Donald Harrington, used Morgan's story as inspiration for what would be his final novel. He apparently became fascinated by her case and decided to write elements of it into the story of a little girl who gets kidnapped by a retired police officer. His novels always had a pedophilic and violent theme to them, and this novel, entitled With, was no different. When interviewed, Harrington told the reporter that he, quote, always interjected people he knew, places he had seen, things he had done, and ideas he felt were important, along with other small bits of truth into his writings, end quote. And when you understand the themes that he included in his books, that statement becomes a lot more disgusting. This case has been going on almost 25 years, and it's still not regarded as a cold case. Police say they receive tips every day and follow up on all that they can. Colleen still leads the fight for her daughter's case to be solved and for other families to never have to go through the same thing. Colleen says, quote, if I quit fighting for her, eventually everyone else will quit fighting as well, end quote. And that's such a sobering quote to me. But Colleen really perseveres and pushes through what has to be a lot of really, really hard stuff. She's just such an incredible mother and doing everything that she can to make sure her daughter's case is still in the forefront of people's minds. We wanted to add a little disclaimer, and this could apply to any case, but we wanted to mention it specifically here because there has been a lot of misinformation thrown around about this case. Popular cases can get skewed, like that game of telephone that we all probably played as kids. Sometimes reporters take bits of information and run with it, embellishing it or taking things out of context until the most prominent information is not entirely correct. Some investigators are not even sure that the description of the truck or the witness in the beginning are correct at all. We do our best to investigate these cases, but especially in popular cases with many sealed files, it's hard to substantiate every single detail, as I mentioned before. If we got something wrong or you have more information, maybe we didn't focus on something that you think is important or significant or something like that, please let us know. We would love to provide updates or corrections if we find them, and we really want to be able to share true facts of the case with our listeners on every single case. There are so many theories on this case that we couldn't cover them all, so we picked out the main ones that we thought were interesting. You can really go into an internet rabbit hole with this case for sure. There's lots of web sleuths exploring every nook and cranny of this case. So we're just going to get into the main ones that we found, and if you want to do your own exploring on this case, there's a lot out there.
The first theory is that a man named Edward Keith Reniger had something to do with Morgan Nick's disappearance. Edward Keith Reniger owned a red truck and lived nearby during the time of the disappearance. In 1994, he was also convicted of sexual assault, so this was just a year before Morgan Nick's disappearance. Also, he had gotten out of prison from a 10-month sentence for kidnapping the month before Morgan disappeared. In 2018, genetic genealogy was able to link Edward Keith Reniger to the sexual assault and murder of a woman named Pamela Felkins that happened in 1990. So he definitely had a rocky past. He definitely didn't lead the best lifestyle. And considering that he drove a red truck and lived near the same area as Morgan, it was considered a viable theory.
Some of the connections there are kind of weak maybe, but if you add it all up, it seems like it could be something. Another theory we came across involved Morgan's father, John Nick. John had quite the criminal record. As far back as 1987, he had criminal charges against him, and this continued up into at least 2006. His charges pertained to drugs. He even had one situation where he was charged with endangering the welfare of a child, but this was later dropped. We found in some court documents dated 2008 that John Nick was allegedly a small-time drug dealer, and in these documents it stated that he was helping the police with a sting on his supplier, Clifford Pullen. Pullen was not a good guy. He had a long history with the police, and he was even convicted of violation of a minor in the first degree in July of 1995, 1 month after Morgan was taken. Allegedly, he also had a history of trading drugs for sex with underage girls. Pullen could have come across Morgan while delivering drugs. It was said that he was so comfortable with John Nick that he would just walk into his house without knocking, that they had that kind of relationship where he was just very comfortable in and around his house. Pullen could have come across Morgan while delivering drugs over the years. He may have decided to grab her, maybe for revenge, maybe for his own purposes. So that's another pretty bad guy that was connected to Morgan that could have had something to do with her case.
Another theory is that there was just an opportunistic pedophile that happened to be passing through or was visiting with the opposing team, but this really hasn't been substantiated in any way that we found. If you see anything like that, let us know. We love to dig deep into these kind of theories, but we just didn't see anything about a specific pedophile who may have been passing through the area at the time.
Yeah, a lot of names were thrown around, but nothing that had significant weight behind it that we saw. So there's plenty of places to go with that, but we thought that sort of broadly it was worth a mention. But if you want to get more into those theories, there's plenty out there.
There were also some web sleuths who found a post on a now defunct forum of a woman named Stacy Miller. Some people believe that this is actually Morgan Nick. The boyfriend of Stacy, named Jason Brock, posted in the forum about his girlfriend who didn't know who she was or where she came from. She was saying that she had been abused and kept secluded for most of her childhood, and that she vaguely remembers being taken. She was raised by a man who was said to be her uncle, which is kind of ironic when we think back about the sighting at the store where it was an uncle and the little girl. Also, Stacy says that she carries the flyer of Morgan around with her, and she's scared to come forward due to causing her mother more pain. She's on drugs, and she thinks that she might be a disappointment in a way to her mother, and just is afraid to come forward. We did find the archive of the forum, but it doesn't go back far enough to this post, unfortunately. But there was another forum that was very interesting to read. It was posted by a woman named Cheryl Steven, and she seemed to me to be somewhat eerie in a way with what she was saying. She either knew a lot more and needed to be talked to, or she was just delusional. She was saying things like, Morgan has a new family and her name is... She was saying things like, Morgan has a new family and that Morgan's name was now Morgan Stacy Hampton, which is slightly ironic because her middle name was Stacy and the girl in the other forum said her name was Stacy Miller. But she was even calling Colleen Morgan's foster mother and saying how appreciative Morgan was for Colleen raising her until she could be with her adoptive parents, which is completely horrendous to say to a woman who has lost her child, and to even put that out in public and to even post that, even though she's not directly saying it to Colleen. It's still a slap in Colleen's face and very disrespectful. She talked about how Morgan was... The delusional part of it kind of comes in when you think about how Morgan would be in her late 20s at the time of this post, but she still talked about Morgan as if she was in elementary school, and it just didn't seem to add up quite right. There were many, many posts like this, and they all had the same style of writing by Cheryl. And they had very specific information and names that were commented. So that's what made this theory a little bit unique and a little bit interesting, is because it's either true or insane.
Yeah, like if you had no connection to it, why would you go that deep, that specific? She was very, very specific about like schools and names of siblings and family members and all this stuff.
And like things Morgan liked to do in her free times now. And
yeah, just so specific. Like, why would you make that up?
And it was paragraphs of writing.
And many, many comments.
We'll try to put a link for that on our website for you guys to read. It's really eerie.
Some people think that Morgan was abducted as part of a nationwide trafficking ring. Alma is at the crossroads of 4 major highways and about 10 minutes from the Arkansas-Oklahoma border. So it makes it sort of an ideal place for people to get away quick and to do it discreetly. A Today in Fort Smith reporter was told by an unnamed source that Morgan was kidnapped as part of a pedophile ring and was accidentally killed. This person claimed that a man involved in the sex ring was working in construction and that Morgan was buried under a house near Harrison. I know that this theory has been relayed to the police. I don't know if they're actively working on it or if they've ruled it out, but I know that this information has been given to them, so at least with that, they can be working on it if it is anything. But another part of this comes to a man named Nathaniel Benjamin Levi Bar Jonah. And we're not going to get too deep into him because just let us tell you that he deserves an episode of his own, that he is just the most awful person that like I've ever come across.
Ditto.
He is a convicted child molester, serial killer, and cannibal, if that doesn't give you a little insight. He also set up a local chapter, I guess you'd call it, of NAMBLA, which I don't recommend looking up. It's basically a pedophile organization, and he founded the local chapter of this organization. He was living in Fort Smith in 1995, which was really close to where Morgan disappeared, and he was very involved in pedophile rings and things like that. He was eventually caught with thousands of images of child pornography, both of male and female children. So that's definitely a connection, just someone that awful. Being that close to something like that happening, you have to give that sort of a second look. But like I said, we'll be doing a whole episode on this horrific individual. Like we said before, a lot of names have been thrown out relating to this case, but nothing has stuck so far. The police haven't commented on having one concrete suspect or that many persons of interest that they're naming. So we'll just have to sort of sit back with this one and really hope that the police keep at it and eventually find out what happened to Morgan.
At the time of Morgan's disappearance, she was 6 years old, 4 feet tall, and weighed about 55 pounds. She has blonde hair and blue eyes, as well as 5 silver caps on her molars. She was wearing a Girl Scouts t-shirt, blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. She would currently be 30 years old, and we have an age-progressed photo on our website, as well as a photo of her at the time of the disappearance for you to go on and reference. As of 2019, an award of $60,000 is available for anyone who finds her. If you have any information, please call the Alma Police Department at 1-479-632-3930, or you can contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. According to a Fox article, NCMEC has had more than 40 children recovered in recent years after being missing for more than 20 years. So there is hope for Morgan Nick, and it's just a matter of coming forward with information if you have any. Colleen started the Morgan Nick Foundation in 1996, and they release a pink balloon every year in honor of Morgan Nick. The organization still stays strong today by helping parents with missing children and preventing future abductions. They help connect people who have missing or exploited children, as well as assisting with case management. The Morgan Nick Foundation works with Team Hope and NetSmarts, and in 2019, the foundation received the Victim of Crime Assistance Grant, which offered about $500,000. This is going to allow them to expand and do so much more in the near future. And they're a great organization. I can't wait to just see how they improve. If you want to find out more, go to morgannickfoundation.com. That kind of brings us to the end of the disappearance of Morgan Nick, and we'll leave you with the word from Morgan's mother, Colleen.
This is not, what happened to Morgan is not some mysterious event that can't be solved. Someone knows the answer to what happened to her. And I've thought about it so many times over the years how difficult it might be to call the police and to give that piece of information, because it could bring harm to their family. It could bring bad things to their door. It could mean someone they love would be arrested. You know, I would really want to encourage whoever knows the truth to just find the courage to do that one right thing that's always bothered them, that they've always wanted to do, to be able to find the courage to make the phone call that would bring Morgan back home to our family. And I think it will probably be the hardest thing they've ever done, is to tell the truth. But they literally make the difference to whether or not Morgan gets to come home. Here's the thing. Someday, when Morgan comes home and she looks me in the eye, I want to be able to look at her and say, I never stopped fighting for you. I have always believed that you would come home. That's my promise to her.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Don't forget to go to our website for more information, more pictures from this case, and links for if you want to go down the rabbit hole and explore on your own. Don't forget to give us a rating. That really, really helps us get in more feeds and grow our audience.
Hint, hint, a 5-star.
Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook. Join our Abyss group.
Share interesting cases that you like on Facebook from our Facebook page. Put the word out there. Tell your friends about it. We really want to be able to connect with all of you guys. We want you guys to be a part of our episodes and to reach out to us and to talk to us. So please spread the word.
And don't forget, our next Abyss Book Club episode will be coming out March 6th. We're reading Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens.
So good.
So hope you're reading that and you're excited for our next episode there. So we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for jumping into the abyss with us.
Bye.
Bye. I just don't know the same things sometimes.
Okay. Ball game at Woofwood.
Woofwood. Woofwood. Woofwood. Woofwood.
The almond
joy. Do
you ever
Huh?
That's what you sound like. A little video of that little boy where he's like, has you ever had a dream where you do you and then but
and they no, we're gurgling.
Hallie had an accident.
Came on my nose.
A little bit.
Flash flood warning. In my eyes. Okay. Words. What are they? Okay.